Well, this is a story about a king, but not just any old king. He was the richest and most powerful king in the world. You might think that would be pretty nice, but it did cause a problem because he had so much money and so much power. He never had much to occupy his mind, and he was always coming up with foolish ideas. His wife was a very wise woman, and one day she sat him down and she said, "Even though you are the richest and the most powerful king in the world, you're not going to live forever. Who's going to be the king after you die?" Well, the king and his wife didn't have any children. So the king said he would think about it. He would come up with a way to choose the next king. He thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. And then he said, "I know. I'll have a contest. I'll say that I'm looking for the strongest man in the land. Any man can join the contest. And when one of them proves that he's the strongest, he will be the next king." His wife said, "I don't think that's a very good idea. What if the strongest man is cruel? Or what if he's foolish? Or what if the people don't like him?" But the king just waved his hand and said, "The king has spoken." So the word was sent all over the kingdom, and strong men started coming to the king's palace to join the contest. In one faraway corner of the country, there was a young shepherd boy, a boy who took care of the sheep. He wasn't even the strongest man in his little village. But when he heard about the king's contest, he thought, "Ooh, what if I could prove to be the strongest man in the land? What if I got to be the next king? What a good life I would have then." He started thinking about it all day long when he sat watching over the flock of sheep. At night, when he slept beside the flock, he would dream about it. Finally, he told his mother what was on his mind. And his mother said, "Why would you want to waste your time with the king and his contest? If that king had any sense, he wouldn't have a contest like that in the first place." But the boy said he really wanted to try. So his mother gave him her blessing, and she told him, "Before you leave for the king's palace, go and visit our neighbor. That old woman is a sorceress. She might be able to help you in some way." So he went and talked to the old woman who lived next door. She went to a big wooden chest. She opened it and dug down to the bottom, and she found out a little gold ring. She told him if he would put that ring on his right hand, every time he would bless himself by making the sign of the cross, like this, "En nombre del Padre, del Hijo, del Espíritu Santo." Every time he would do that, his strength would be doubled. And then if he would make the sign of the cross backwards, his strength would be cut in half. He thanked the old woman, and he started down the road to go to the king's palace. He hadn't been traveling very far when he saw a wagon load of hay by the side of the road. He thought he would find out if the old woman had told him the truth. He walked over to the wagon, he grabbed the back of it, and he tried to lift it. He couldn't move it from the ground. Then he took the ring out of his pocket and put it on his right hand, and he blessed himself, "En el nombre del Padre, Hijo, Espíritu Santo." And then he grabbed the back of the wagon, and he could lift it clear to his knees. He set it down, and he blessed himself again. He had already been twice as strong, so now he should be 2 times 2, 4 times as strong. He easily lifted the back of the wagon to his waist. He blessed himself again. He should be 8 times as strong. He lifted with one hand, and the wagon tipped over and the hay went scattering all over the ground. He quickly set the wagon back on its wheels and reloaded the hay before someone would come and be angry with him. And then he made the sign of the cross backwards until his strength was normal. He took off the ring and put it in his pocket, and he went on down the road. When nighttime came, he slept under a tree by the side of the road. He didn't know it, but while he was sleeping, the ring fell out of his pocket. In the morning, he woke up and went on his way, leaving the ring on the ground under the tree. He hadn't been gone very long when a priest came riding up the road on his little donkey. He saw the shady tree, and he thought he would stop and rest for a little while in the shade. He walked over and he leaned up against the tree, closed his eyes, and then after a while he sat up again. And when he sat up, he saw the ring on the ground. He picked it up and said, "Oh, that ring must be worth something. I'll wear it on my finger until I get to the village, and then I will sell it and I'll give the money to the church." But because he was a priest, before he went on his way, he had to say a prayer. He blessed himself in el nombre del Padre Espíritu Santo. He said his prayer. At the end of his prayer, he blessed himself again. He was 4 times as strong. When he stood up, he reached over and grabbed a branch of the tree to steady himself, and he tore the branch right off the tree. He said, "Oh, that looked like a sturdy branch, but it must have been rotten." He gave the branch a flip, and it flew out of sight across the field. And then he walked over to where his little donkey was eating grass. He said, "Well, old friend, we'd better be on our way." He patted the donkey's neck, and the poor little burro was knocked to the ground. Its neck was almost broken. The priest said, "Heaven help us, is this place enchanted?" And he blessed himself again. Then he reached down and grabbed the saddle of the donkey and lifted to help it back to its feet. The burro flew about 10 feet into the air. The priest said, "I'm getting out of here." And his voice was so loud, it blew all the leaves from the tree. He hurried away from there, but he kept praying and blessing himself as he walked along. After a while, the boy reached the village, and he reached into his pocket to get some money to buy some food with, and he realized his ring was gone. He started back down the road. He saw a man coming up the road toward him, dressed all in black. He was raising a cloud of dust, pulling up fence posts and knocking over trees. The boy shouted at him. He said, "Father, did you find a ring?" The priest tried to whisper his answer. It came out, "Yes." The boy said, "Father, make the sign of the cross backwards." The priest started blessing himself backwards until he thought his strength had returned to normal. And then he took the ring from his finger and he threw it at the boy. He said, "Take your ring. I want no part of it." But his strength was still twice what it should be, and the ring flew right past the boy and landed in the tall grass at the edge of the road. The boy said, "Father, that's all right. Go on into the village. I saw the people waiting for you at the church. I'll stay here and find my ring." The priest went away, and the boy started walking back and forth, but he couldn't find the ring. Finally, he thought he would go into the village and get something to eat and then come back and look some more. He hadn't gone away long this time when a little old lady came walking up the road. She was on her way to the church in the village. She was praying to herself as she walked along, and she saw the ring on the ground. She said, "Oh, what a pretty ring!" She picked it up and she put it on her finger. And then she blessed herself. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, del Espíritu Santo. She reached over to pull the handkerchief out of her sleeve, and she tore the sleeve right off her dress. She said, "Válgame Dios, how did that happen?" And she blessed herself again. And she kept walking down the road, praying and blessing herself. She came to a place where two men were trying to make a stubborn mule move down the road. One of the men was pushing the hindquarters of the mule. The other one was pulling on the reins from the front. But the mule had its hooves dug into the ground. It wouldn't budge. The little old lady said, "Shame on you, you stubborn mule!" She poked it with her walking stick, and the mule flew past the man in front. It didn't hit the ground till it was 100 feet down the road. And the old lady walked on, still praying and blessing herself. And when she got to the church, she was so strong, she tore the door from its hinges. She went walking down the aisle, knocking over benches and dumping people to the floor. The priest looked up from his book and he realized what was going on. He said, "Señora, make the sign of the cross backwards." The little old lady started blessing herself in reverse. When she just had the strength of a young woman, he told her to stop. And then he took the ring from her finger. He called for the boy and gave it to him. And the boy put that ring on his finger, and he didn't take it off again until he got to the king's palace. When he arrived at the palace, the courtyard was full of strong young men. They were wrestling with each other and fighting with swords. Some of them were trying to throw heavy rocks over houses. Some of them could do it, but most of them couldn't, and the rocks would land on top of the houses and break holes in the roofs. Some of them had broken arms and big gashes from the sword fights. Finally, one young man, a handsome prince in elegant clothes, showed that he was stronger than anyone else. The king declared that the strongest man had been found. He said, "If anyone would like to challenge the prince, let him say so now." The boy said, "Your Majesty, maybe I could be stronger than that prince." Everyone turned to look at the boy. His legs were long and spindly. His shoulders weren't very broad. He was almost dressed in rags. The king said, You don't even have a decent set of clothes. How can you challenge a prince?" The boy said, "Your Majesty, you said anyone can join the contest. I want to challenge that prince." So the king said that in 1 week there would be a contest between the boy and the prince. The prince spent the whole week exercising by wrestling with 10 men at a time and lifting heavy rocks over his head. The boy spent the week asleep in a haystack. When the day of the contest arrived, a crowd gathered to watch. The king had spoken with his craftsmen, and he had had them make 4 large pillars. One pillar of wood, a second pillar of stone, a third pillar of iron, and a fourth pillar of solid gold. He thought that anyone who could lift a pillar made of each one of those substances would be the strongest man in the world. He led the boy and the prince to the pillar made of wood. The prince stretched and then walked over and took hold of that pillar, and he lifted it clear to his waist. A cheer went up from the crowd. The boy walked up to the pillar of wood, and he made the sign of the cross, twice as strong. He blessed himself again. He was 4 times as strong. He took hold of that pillar and he threw it into the air. It rose above them until it was just a speck in the sky. And when it came falling back to the ground, the earth shook so much that the windows of the palace rattled. And then the king led the boy and the prince to the pillar made of stone. Again, the prince groaned and stretched. He took hold of that pillar. He could lift it to his knees. The boy blessed himself 8 times as strong. He blessed himself again 16 times as strong. He threw the pillar of stone into the sky. It rose and rose above them. It came tumbling back to earth, and when it struck the ground shook with so much force that a crack appeared in the wall of the palace. And then the king led them to the pillar made of iron. The prince threw all his strength into it. He could lift the pillar a couple of inches from the ground. The boy blessed himself again. He was 32 times as strong. He did it one more time. He was 64 times as strong. He threw the pillar of iron into the sky. It disappeared above them, and when it came tumbling back to earth, the ground shook like an earthquake, and the castle cracked in half. The king led them to the pillar made of gold. But the prince had used up all his strength. He couldn't even try it. The king told the boy, "If you can lift this pillar, you will be the king when I die. And in the meantime, you can keep all this gold." But the boy was looking around him. And he said, "Do you know what? I don't think I'll even try. Look at all the harm your idea has done. I can see men with broken arms. I see men with broken legs. I can see that your palace is cracked in half. I'm beginning to worry. If I become the king, maybe I'll end up as foolish as you are. I think I had better go back home where I belong." And that's what he did. He went back home. When he arrived back home, he made the sign of the cross backwards until his strength was just what it should be. And then he gave the gold ring back to the wise woman next door. And do you know what happened at the palace? The queen sat the king down again, and she told him it wouldn't matter whether that boy were stronger than the prince or not. It wouldn't matter if he were only half as strong as the prince. He has proved that he's twice as wise as the king, and he is the one who should be the next king. And for once, the king listened to his wife. So you can probably guess the rest of the story. When the old king died, the boy became the king.